Okay, so James and Mars and Ben, what drew you to this session of what did we call it? We called it Intergenerational Leadership in a Spiritual Community, Learning, Collaboration, and Wisdom Transmission. So I will start with James because you were first in.
Well, I'm interested for two reasons. One, I'm really interested in clear sky. My sort of circle of spiritual and practicing friends here in Ontario, a lot of people have various connections to Maple in Vermont. And every once in a while it comes up, clear sky is like another thing vaguely in that space. However, every time I do come into contact with you guys, it feels quite different. So I've been really looking and appreciating the opportunities to get to know more about Clear Sky at this year's Limicon. And then the other reason I'm drawn to this session in particular is that me and my spiritual partner live a kind of monastic life of our own, just in our own environment, working on sort of very spiritually informed relational practice. And there's a generational gap between us. There's 26 years between us. So the work that we're doing feels like it has intergenerational overtones sometimes. And so I'm interested in that topic as well.
Thank you, James. That's lovely. Ben.
Just a second. I'm a Unitarian minister. So we're trying to create intergenerational community, and we've often been on the forefront of social change. But to be honest, a lot of our congregations are full of older people. And even if they're trying really hard to stay at the forefront, in some ways, the younger generations are a step ahead of them. So there's figuring out how learning can go both ways, and how to have the humility and the skills to across the generations so that we can do community.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Welcome. Your beautiful questions. Mars.
Yeah, sure. The curiosity brought me here. I'm part of the Limicon. I saw the calendar. I noticed that Clear Sky members organize loads of events, and this is surely not a coincidence. So I thought, wow, leadership, intergenerational, these are very cool. I hope these are not just the buzzwords. I'm hoping that I will receive some insights, knowledge, experience. So yeah, I'll be listening. Thank you for organizing.
Oh, you're very welcome, Mars. Welcome. Thanks for all your organization with Limicon. And Stefan, is it Stefan Berries? Would you like to open up? And our question was what attracted you to this session?
Yes, also I just jumped in, I saw the calendar, and I thought it would be some nice inputs how you work, if it's really on-site, some intergenerational, and I just would listen into what are your experiences.
Great, thank you, Stefan. Welcome. Okay, great. Well, shall we jump in, team? Okay, great. So we're so glad you're here. And this isn't just a presentation, it's a living expression of what's possible when different generations come together in a conscious community. And we're an intergenerational leadership in action team, I would call us. And our team spans baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. We're all living and we're all practicing together in a spiritual residential community. So we're not just talking about community, we're actually living it, and we've been living it, and we gave birth in 2004, and so we've been living it for about 20 years. And in a time when so many people are hungry for belonging, they're so hungry for guidance, so hungry for purpose, we believe that what we're sharing today can light a path forward. Well, we're hoping that would be the case. So what you'll experience in the session is real rooted in years of boots on the ground practice. deep inner work, and a shared commitment to spiritual awakening individually and collectively. So you'll hear from each of the generations as we explore how wisdom is transmitted, how collaboration unfolds across ages and in life stages, and how leadership can be a practice of love, of learning, and liberation, right? Now, the interesting thing today is we don't have any of our baby boomers. Two of our main baby boomers, one of them was a leader of our organization, passed away last October 2024. And so Gen X has been suddenly there's an open kind of, we have our Catherine Sensei, whom I'm sure you went to some of her talks. She is our spiritual leader, and then the rest of Gen X is sort of stepping up behind her in a kind of a group leadership model, right? So and what's very interesting is that I think people have talked about the ways forward, and it has been where Gen X and the millennials and Gen Z need to be working more closely together. And so suddenly we're in this phase of our community where Gen X leadership is now really working very closely with millennials and Gen Z. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting for the future of the planet. So we're going to begin by grounding in the 5 principles that shape our lives. And I'm going to hand you over to Duncan Cryle. He's the co-executive director. I'm the co-executive director of Clear Sky, by the way. And I'm a Gen X, and I'm going to hand it over to Duncan Cryle, who's also a Gen X and co-executive director, who's going to talk a little bit about our 4 pillars and how, it's very important to have principles or pillars so that we can all center around these pillars to work best together as a team. So over to you, Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So I'll be very brief. We just wanted to give you a little bit of context, I guess, for the where the sort of learning system that we're working in, that the intergenerational work's happening. So we have, if you haven't come across this before, we have a retreat center in British Columbia. It's 300 acres, Clear Sky Center. So I'm a conscious community living there. And then we have a kind of virtual, our teaching lineage is under the name of Planet Dharma. So our head teacher, Catherine Sensei, Karen just mentioned, teaches internationally and online through Planet Dharma. And then, so the teaching wing, Planet Dharma, has these 4 main pillars we just wanted to mention to give you a bit of context. So first of the 4 is meditation. So we're very much grounded in contemplative meditative studies. We're in a Buddhist lineage primarily. So we have morning and evening practices and many retreats and so on that we all do each year. The second pillar is study. So we try to sort of turn on our minds and study liminal and meta-modern and integral and Buddhist scriptures and all of these things. So we try to really educate ourselves. The third we call Karma Yoga, which is awakening in action. So that's really learning through doing. So it's particularly through running the center and running our virtual organization, Planet Dharma, we realized you have to learn to work together and communicate together and be emotionally honest together and get over your blocks around being organized or following through or having someone ask you if you followed through what you were supposed to do. So in the early days, we were a bit comical. We didn't have those skills, and we appointed someone to be a project coordinator who then asked me to update her on what I was doing. And I said, why should I tell you? So we started with quite a low bar, and then I think we've become really quite skillful through the Karma Yoga awakening in action. We've really worked on that. And then our last limb is shadow, integrating the shadow, the last pillar. So we really work a lot on uncovering our blind spots, looking at this kind of blocks. Our shorthand for this is money, sex, and power. So we look at our power control struggles between us, between the generations and between the teams. Our different attitudes towards money. I mean, that might be a theme that comes up. I think they say the biggest intergenerational wealth transfer in history is between the baby boomers and millennials. So then what does that bring up about money for everybody? And then sex, living in a community and just in general relationships and self-value. So we try to kind of, the integrating the shadow pillar is really trying to look at that. So that's the kind of framework in which we work. And then it's also very practical. And I'll throw the ball over to Ava, a millennial, to say something about that.
Thank you. I'll catch the ball. So Yeah, as Duncan said, I'm Ava. I'm the marketing and community manager here at Clear Sky. I've been living here for just over 8 years now. And yeah, so Duncan just outlined the pillars that are foundational for how we operate here, and then how we implement that, how we really work it, is we like to think of it as the living lab. And so it's taking a lot of these concepts, these theories out of just the theoretical into practical application that we really try to live and integrate into how we operate on a daily basis, and also how we help each other unfold further, how we help our community unfold further. And so what that looks like is, as Duncan said, we're always looking at different tools around communication, around, what are things that we can draw on to help support each other's awakening, tools for leadership, teamwork, collaboration, greater self-awareness, and then actually bringing those into how we operate, and to unpacking even, maybe if there's a false harmony, like helping each other really unpack the shadow. And so, like any laboratory, whether it be a scientific research one or a practical lived-in laboratory, it can be very experimental, it can be very messy, and it can be incredibly fun and rewarding. And so we really celebrate that we actively, consciously try to work it every day in how we show up with each other and how we interact with each other. So that's the introduction to that. And then I can't remember what we're
It's okay. I'll jump in.
on to next. Thank
So
you.
just to give you a time check, so we're hoping to just keep this under the hour, and so we'll be talking for about 45 minutes. And each generation we're going to have is going to be invited to reflect on a question. And so we're going to have 2 voices from Gen X, 2 voices from millennials, and then 1 voice from Gen Z, Erica Rasmussen. And so we're going to be sort of doing it in conversational panel style. And yeah, so we hope to finish by 1/4 to the hour, and then we're going to open up for questions from each of you, and then we'll close. So that's how we'll do it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to invite Chris to introduce Ava and name something, Chris, that you've learned from the millennial generation. And then actually invite...
Can I just...
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I just double check we're moving in that direction and not the other?
I think Ava was going to introduce Chris.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes, Ava is going to introduce Chris.
You can see our experimental nature here.
Yes, and Ava is going to name something that she learned from that generation. Over to you.
Thank you. Right. So Chris is he's the Planet Dharma team lead. And so he's the first person in terms of Karma Yoga. He was the first person that I worked with. I was still in university at the time when I met the community. And so I was practicing and participating with the community in a virtual sense at that time. So I was working with Chris virtually well away at university. And I think for me, when I was reflecting on this, I think the biggest thing that I learned from Chris at that time, especially, was that I was coming from a very corporate, capitalistic model. I had worked in the corporate world before then, and I was in university and very much wanting to be on a very specific track of, do these things, get these credentials so you can get this job and you can be successful and give your life a big check mark. And one of the great things that I learned from working with Chris is, and I don't have a term for this, so there's a stereotype for millennials. I'm a millennial, and one of the stereotypes of our generation is, it's called like gentle parenting. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it's kind of a more soft touch parenting. And so here's how I mean this. I felt that from Chris, I learned a very specific type of firm but gentle leadership that I had not encountered previously. Like I said, I came from a very corporate model where it's kind of like if you messed up and you were bad and you could get fired, and there was a very specific type of consequence. And working with Chris was the first Gen X that I'd worked with, and it was the first time where I messed up pretty bad a few times. Let's just say I made some significant errors. I might have ghosted Chris in terms of my responsibilities, so to speak. And there was always a platform where he would just very clearly and very firmly, we could have conversations about it. And it felt like it created a supportive platform for learning and growth. It wasn't just like, oh, you did this wrong, you're out. But it was like, okay, mistakes happen, and how can we learn from this? What can we learn about your patterns to move forward? And so I think that was really my big takeaway, and something I really value in our working relationship. So without further ado, I'll pass the ball over to Chris with my question, which is, Christopher, how have you experienced growth through generational friction or feedback? How have you experienced growth through generational friction or feedback?
Thanks, Ava, and thank you for those kind words, and lovely to hear the impact from back then. Wow, it's neat to see where we are today. Thanks for the question. I think I'd like to preface this with, this may resonate with others in the space, in the room as well, but this idea of intergenerational wisdom and so on, I think is, when I think about that, there's another piece to it that I need to name. I don't know how much I'm going to go into that, but which is because of the nature of our core vision, which is waking up and waking up fully in this lifetime, we tend to look to people as mentors based on the level of their realization, first and foremost. And that is, although, you know, people who tend to be around longer tend to, you know, end up with more realization. It's not a set thing. So I think that comes up for me is, take that. I just want that named as I talk about the intergenerational piece, because it's quite possible that I would be looking to someone younger than me for to shine their wisdom if they are at a higher state of realization. And it was really beautiful. We've seen that with our teachers. Capel, who passed away in the fall that Karen was talking about, had a number of people older than him who had actually been peers over the decades. And it was really, yeah, and then they oriented around him as a teacher. And so I think that's just important to name. And something special, and something I really, that means a lot to me, that it's not just, you're older than me, therefore you should, you know, that authority comes from the actual wisdom and not just from the age. So another thing that comes up for me around this is that our lineage is kind of primes us for the idea of learning from in all directions in a couple of ways. I'm sure other people will speak to other nuances, but for me, what comes up is just the core question of how can new perspectives help my unfoldment. So anytime I'm with somebody who has some sort of difference than me, and so in this today we're talking about generational differences, then it's an opportunity for me to see things in a different way. And how did their way of seeing the world, how can that help me to see the world and my own context in a way that helps with my unfoldment? And then the other thing that I really value, I think is really precious about this lineage is it's both got an energy of lineage, of strong connection to lineage that, you know, can trace the lineage through back to the Buddha in two different ways, and also through the Western mysteries. And so there is a really strong sense of lineage in our tradition. And also that it's all about what's next. Like what's the cutting edge. So when I think about the intergenerational piece, for me, I'm looking at what the baby boomers in the Sangha bring in terms of that lineage, what they're carrying and passing on to us who are younger, in terms of lineage, and then also for the younger folks, helping to shine a light on what's next. I like to think of myself as forward thinking, but one of the things that I definitely value from being around millennials and now Gen Zs is that they're really living it. That things that were for me philosophical beliefs that I took on as I was getting older and understanding the world differently, they're actually living. I'm kind of prefacing what I'm probably going to say when I introduce Ava later on, but that idea of for me, I had to kind of learn to to see the world in more. I think about, for example, gender or sexual orientation and things like that. They are just living mental models that I had to teach myself to do, and so seeing what it looks like to be natively, that wisdom to be native in the generation is really nourishing. And then then I'll just say one more thing about the boomers in a similar way. What I get from them is there's this really strong sense of we just lost two boomers in the last year. They both passed away at the end of last year, but the sense of the trailblazingness of the people who entered the teachings in, say, the 70s, the 60s and 70s, that they really, the stories that they shared about the richness of what it was like to practice back then when these wisdom traditions were just starting here. So with that, I will, I'll wrap up for now and pass it on to Dave, I believe. Is that right?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thanks, Chris and Ava. Happy to introduce Duncan now. He's introduced himself a little bit. Have been working with him. Well, I've also been here about 8 years. Also a millennial like Ava, if it wasn't obvious. Duncan was actually my what we call trainer, his first couple of years when he moved here in 2018, which is basically a senior practitioner training me in unfoldment and all facets of life, using karma yoga service work as the vehicle for that training. And yeah, very kind and giving man. Looking forward to what he has to share. And the one thing I want to touch on that I've learned from Gen X, particularly from Duncan, but other Gen Xers also, is really embodying that well, what I kind of call the Nike attitude, the just do it mindset, which I think I speak for at least most millennials I know when I say that is not in our default programming. It's a very non-native skill for millennials who, I rely very much on motivation, and I need to feel like it, and I need to love it, and I've got to be passionate about it, and to just have a commitment and do it and keep at it is something that is difficult. And so I respect watching Gen Xers who I respect and who are on about really good work, marrying that with that just do it attitude. So yeah, gonna bring Duncan on to talk about, well, asking Duncan, how do you balance supporting both elders and emerging leaders as the middle generation, so to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, this is still very much an exploration for me because it's been interesting. So we got Clear Sky 20 years ago. So then I was in my 30s, and then we spent a lot of time building the center. And then I was really focused on building the center and then supporting our elders who were baby boomers. So Kapel, our dear main founding teacher, Catherine Sensei, our current teacher, and unfortunately, our other baby boomer is sick today, who's going to be here, so we don't have that voice, unfortunately. But so a lot of my focus for those early years was supporting people that were in the baby boomer generation, my teachers and trainers, and helping sort of build the center. And then where we are now, it's sort of interesting. So we still, and at least till the last year, we still had the the baby boomer leadership very much around. But then I'm sort of conscious I'm kind of blocking in a way people like Dave and Erica and Ava, who then are, getting more mature, more experienced and should be stepping into leadership. So there's a sort of a bit of a interesting logjam where one's still sort of supporting the baby boomers as a Gen X, and then the millennials are, at an age where they really need to be stepping into much more responsibility and leadership. So it's a bit of a challenge. So I really like coming across the idea then of the Gen X as the bridge builders. So then, because I think it's very much true in corporate companies too, right? There's a sort of logjam of senior managers and executives that are baby boomers. And then you've got the big millennial generation coming up, and then the sort of Gen Xers are squeezed a bit in the middle. So for me, that was a source of tension for a while, and then the bridge builder helped me sort of really reframe it. So there's a very important role of transitioning. So then I try to focus on both. So how do I support the baby boomer leaders and wisdom there, and how do I kind of step out of the way in the right way, and sort of make space or demand in a way that the millennials are showing up as leaders. So then I have to kind of figure out where I best contribute, so that sort of flow can happen. If that makes sense. It's very much an open question for me, but I like the bridge builder, and it feels purposeful. So like that, where do we go next, Karen? That's my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. So Chris, over to Chris, is going to introduce Ava and name something that he's learned from the millennial generation. Have I got that wrong again?
No, that's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Karen. Yeah, I guess I spoke a bit to it in my piece, but we're going to hear from Ava in a second. I'm going to ask her a question. And I think Ava's really embodies the qualities that I'm just going to quickly name about the millennials that I feel like I benefit from. And so one would be that kind of an openness, more of a sense of what's out there rather than preconceived ideas about what the world is supposed to look like. Another is the networking aspect that I think, definitely big shift from my generation in terms of the sense of being plugged in and connected to others. Multitaskers, very talented at maybe it's that sense of not being so like the world needs to be like this, or I'm supposed to show up just like this, but I can have multiple personalities, multiple type of myself that I show up in different ways, and I can switch between them with relative ease. I appreciate that. And then I did say this, but I want to say it again, that I really am energized by being around Ava and the other millennials, because they really are living these values of a more inclusive, equitable society, and they don't have to kind of check themselves as much, because they just see a more welcoming, they're embodying a more welcoming world. So Ava, my question for you is, what does leadership look like to you when it's rooted in practice rather than personality?
Thanks, Chris. Well, thank you for the introduction. And I think it's interesting, actually, because it's interesting when you use the word inclusivity, because I think one of the biggest things that I've learned when I was reflecting on this question, one of the biggest things that came through is, I think, areas where millennials have not been historically inclusive. So it's an interesting, it's, as we know, so our generation kind of came into maturity at an interesting confluence in history, where simultaneously, so technology, your technological ability is what gave you a competitive advantage in the workplace. So then suddenly you're seeing people who are quite young out competing people with a lot more wisdom in the job market, like especially in the tech sector. There's one person that's part of our community that I think he was a COO by 24 of some big AI tech company, for example. And simultaneously, at the same time, I'm realizing I need to talk fast. Okay, simultaneously at the same time, so I graduated university. Entered the job market in 2008 when there was the market crash, and was being told as a millennial, you're the first generation that is not going to be as financially successful as your parents, as the boomers. So there was kind of this multifaceted thing where it seemed like suddenly there was, for myself, suddenly it was kind of like the influencer culture maybe became more valued. So if I can show up as the young, techie, cool person that has a big following on the internet, then that's giving me the skill set, and that's giving me value, I guess. And I named that because, so when I first came to Clear Sky, that was a really unconscious bias. So when Chris mentions inclusivity, I think that there is an exclusivity with our generation of, if someone doesn't have that same degree of technological prowess, then you might not listen to what they have to say. You might not listen to the wisdom that they have, or look beyond the fact that they're taking too long to open the Google Doc, gosh darn it. So therefore they must not know as much as I know. I'm being sarcastic, but it's true. I mean, that what I think would be unconscious biases that I certainly had when I first came to Clear Sky. And for me, that's important. So when the question talks about leadership rooted in practice rather than personality, I think before I came here, personality, the influencer culture, the person that kind of was the book smartest person in the room, I would give them more airtime. And one of the things that I really valued in being here, it was really painful at the beginning. I really had to unpack a lot of those unconscious biases that were quite vulnerable and quite painful. But leadership rooted in practice, the way that it was really approached here at Clear Sky, that really supported me in this journey would be, so one of the pillars we have at Planet Dharma is supporting those more experienced than you. So really trying to unpack, okay, what is experience? What is wisdom? What does that look like? Okay, if I'm with someone that's been practicing Dharma for 20 years, I should actually pause and listen to what they have to say. So really honoring that principle. And one of the things as well when I first came here, we focused a lot on was Michelle, who's part of our team. She's a Gen Xer, and she would really name to me around that, which appreciates. So if Karen had a great idea, really moving away from that maybe capitalist influencer model of, okay, can I try and take credit for that? Or like a kind of a competitive model, I guess, so to speak, and instead moving to a model of inclusivity and really celebrating everything that everyone is bringing to the table. And so if maybe I did something and I'm getting recognition for, but it was actually Karen's idea, and so she's the one that suggested I do it, then when I'm getting the recognition saying, oh, thank you, and actually it was Karen's idea. And so I think that was a really big unconscious bias that helped me to step out of being the great individual into being the great team, and really seeing the value of the leadership and really supporting the value. Thanks, Tony. I see you. I'll be super quick. And then learning from them, the more that I'm open and receptive and appreciating them and supporting them, then I'm going to be learning so much more and not just trying to be a great individual on my own. And then the last thing is, I think, then just authenticity was the big piece that I've really learned. And so I'd say that's what leadership rooted in practice. I would say supporting those more experienced, that's what appreciating teamwork and authenticity. And I'm at time, so I'm going to pause there and throw the ball back to Karen. But
Yeah, thanks,
thank
Amy.
you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to change it up a bit because we haven't heard from the Gen Zs and we've heard from two Gen Xs and one millennial. So yeah, so the Gen X, the bridge builders and the integrators, the millennials, the emerging leadership and cultural innovators. And now I want to go to the new energy and visionaries of Gen X, right, which is our lovely Erica over here. So I'm going to introduce her because Erica works quite closely with me. I'm her guide and her trainers. So yeah, I want to just maybe just introduce her and just say, you know, Gen Z listens with their whole being. This is what I've noticed coming as a bridge builder, that they're attuned not just to words, but to energy, to authenticity and embodiment. And for someone like Erica, I find it's not just what I say, but it's how I live. And she listens for that congruence, for elders or trainers or mentors who walk their talk. And when she finds it, which she found, I feel, at Clear Sky, she listens with like a reverence, like a hunger and a deep readiness to receive. And I find from working with Erica over the years and from other Gen Zs, they learn through experience. They don't want abstract theory. You know, they want lived truth, which makes Clear Sky a very precious opportunity for Gen Z. And so, you know, I've noticed that Erica learns by doing, by being included, by being trusted with real responsibility. And she learns through dialogue, shared practice, and witnessing, you know, her teacher, Catherine Sensei, or some of the old trainers and mentors here stay present, especially through difficulty, right? And I feel like she learns best when she's seen as an equal in essence, even if it's different in experience. So for Gen Z, I've noticed that collaboration isn't just getting a task done like for us in Gen X, and this is what I learn. It's about building relationship, it's making space for each voice and sort of co-creating something really meaningful. And I find working with Erica, she collaborates with humility and care. She doesn't necessarily seek the spotlight, but is committed to contributing her part. She holds me. I find that I really have to be really transparent with Erica, very transparent. She values transparency and gets very upset with me if I am a little off in my transparency and out of integrity. And I thank Erica for that a lot. She values mutual respect and you know, shared purpose. So I feel like Gen Z really are so ready and so ahead of the curve in being part of what a shared valued community looks like and lives. And I know she tries when our teacher Catherine Sensei creates a safe space for her voice to emerge, right? And then what I notice about wisdom transition for Gen Z is that it's not top down, it's relational. So I get so much as a Gen X from working with Erica. She really has developed parts of my being I could not have if I didn't work so closely with the Gen Z. And Erica receives wisdom. Well, as I said, when our teachers around her model the teachings, they don't just speak them. And, you know, she's very deeply moved by presence, consistency, and vulnerability. And I don't feel she needs perfection. She just needs, and Gen Z in general need realness in this world that we live today. And I find that especially because I make mistakes. I'm human, right? Everybody knows here, they know my bullshit, right? So when I've shared my bullshit, particularly over the last year, and when I share my bullshit and my mistakes, I expected rejection, but I did not get rejection. You know, it lit a fire in her and developed a closer relationship with me. And so you know, she said to me, well, I heard in my words, she told me the path is possible and I'm not alone, just from my vulnerable sharing. So when I shared my mistakes, my humanity and my enduring practice, it really, she's come closer. So I'm going to hand over to the lovely Erica and her question, what she wanted to talk about, what does it mean to Erica to receive wisdom from elders, and when do you push back? So over to you, Erica.
Thank you, Karen. I'm close to crying from that beautiful sharing about working together, and I love you, and I'm so grateful for our intergenerationalness and work together. So thank you. Hello, I'm Erica. I came to Clear Sky first 2 years ago when I was 25, and I think Karen named, yes, I found something that I was able to trust here in a state, in a reality where I didn't feel like there was anything to trust anymore. And a lot of that is to do with what I received from my elders and being able to trust that there is a wisdom beyond myself, that I need to be ready to receive. And that feels like a really big part of the spiritual path. And also, when I came here and came to these teachings and learned that the first stage of awakening is actually when you receive the ability to learn. That was a huge dose of humility that I'm not there yet. And wow, I mean, life is just learning, but that, yeah, the path, the first part of the path is learning how to learn. um, really amazing. Um, so recently in an interview with our teacher, Catherine Sensei, she brought up the teaching of the three cups, which I've enjoyed talking about recently. So there's an upside down cup, and I can often be this upside down cup, I think, that just isn't able to take in anything because it's upside down and it's not really hearing or listening. It's not ready to receive. And then there's a cup, right side up, but full of holes. So everything's falling out as it comes in. And I can often, I think, also be this cup that is kind of listening, but it's going out one ear. And what I've been learning with my elders here at Clear Sky is how to, well, in a student-teacher relationship and in an youth and elder relationship and position, become the empty cup, who can be this being, whatever this being is, and receive fully the wisdom that there is to receive from my elders and from other, and then integrate it. So I love that that teaching, and it's a everyday practice for me because I'm the upside down cup, and I'm the cup with holes in it, and I'm learning from my elders how to be the empty cup. Yeah, and then it's not really been part of my historical and family conditioning to be able to push back or offer my own opinion. That was really not, it didn't feel supported for me growing up at home. And that pattern has come up a lot here in community. And I've been really encouraged by the people I'm working with in Karma Yoga, Karen and Duncan and Sensei, to offer my own perspective and give it to the community out of generosity, actually, because it's generous to offer what we have to offer that is of value. And an example would be working with Karen in Karma Yoga, and I didn't voice my opinion when I thought something wasn't going to work well, or maybe had an idea of something that might work better. And my patterns and habits are just to kind of assume that that's not okay or allowed, or won't be received well. So in the last 2 years, that is starting to untangle in the path of untangling. And so I can learn how to push back, or really, I think it's more of a offer what I have to offer out of generosity. And the huge circle and cycle of generosity that is life here with those at Clear Sky and on this planet. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. I'm just looking at a time check, and I just thought Dave and Duncan, do you mind holding off for a bit while we just open up for questions? Because we've been doing a lot of talking. Is that okay, Dave? Yeah, okay. So I'd like to open up to James and Ben and Rossi and Stefan. Was there what came up for you? Was there, I'm just curious to see what landed for you, what insights arose, what questions you have. Ben.
Yeah. I find that some people, older people, are not used to saying how they feel, more indirect. And I think someone here mentioned younger people valuing authenticity. So I just wonder what's possible in terms of expecting older people to become comfortable actually saying how they're feeling or what they need.
Thanks, Ben. Is that a question you'd like to ask us about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, how have we as older people come to feel okay about being vulnerable about what's going on for us? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Duncan or Chris, I mean, I can go, I think I just said it in my previous thing, we're very much on about shadow integration. So our teachers have never encouraged us to hide behind our role of responsibility or leadership. And it's all about everybody joining in. If you've got a shadow, to everybody joining in to point that shadow out in a loving way and to bring it to the table. And so a lot of people here have seen me being trained in front of everyone. And that's sort of the culture. That's sort of the culture. And as a Gen X, that was hard in the beginning because you're meant to keep your stuff behind closed doors, right? You're meant to keep things in undercover, right? So it's very embedded in our culture that we're doing this for the sake of awakening. So the intention and the motivation is very, very important, right? Otherwise it can seem like it's abuse when it's not. So that you've got to really understand what's happening here. And we're very skillful as a community in bringing out the shadow and dealing with the shadow. And we always have this question, how can we make ourselves more trustworthy to people in the community, right? Rather than I don't trust them or they're not trustworthy, right? It's always brought in, how do I make myself more trustworthy to the community?
How big a group do you think it can be and still develop that trust?
Oh,
Like like, do we need to encourage people to form smaller groups so they can go deeper, for example?
I think so, absolutely. I think so. We're a small group, and we can have 12 to 15 people living here all year round. And trust is a very fragile thing, slowly built, and we would like to stay small simply because we can innovate and deepen trust and do things that as you get big you cannot do, right? Duncan and Chris, do you have anything to add?
I guess very quickly, I think maybe again Gen X have a helpful role here, Ben, and but my experience has been a bit similar to Karen because we're sort of in the middle between the baby boomer sort of elder leaders, teachers, and the millennials and Gen Z sort of struggling through stuff. We're kind of not perfect, as Karen said. We're still works in progress, and it's much less hierarchical. It's not like we're the 75-year-old elder and we're sort of in the trenches as well, so to speak. So then I think Gen X, for me, it was a kind of learning. It felt better in the end. Like I couldn't hold, pretending just to be all on it, because it's just such a work in progress and it's in the middle ground. So just sharing that was much better. And then I think that models well. And then I think some of the older people, because we're all still works in progress, right? Whether we're 70 or 80 or I think that can help those people then take a step towards that. And it's important to navigate, I think, that if an elder person is sharing a vulnerability or so on, I think if people feel it will take away from all of their experience, right? If they share a weakness or something. So it's also just holding it that way, that we're not perfect, that experience is still there, and we're works in progress. So I think finding that balance is very helpful to So Karen and I can be a mess in front of the younger ones, but they still respect the work we have done.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear from Erica and Ava and Dave, because you've seen us be vulnerable. How's that been for you? Putting you all on the spot.
Yeah, I can jump in. I find it incredibly supportive. I think, when you first start doing the work, back to the personality thing, you can kind of feel like you have it all together, think you have it all together. And then the more that you do spiritual work, the more that you realize it's about letting go. And I think the only way that I've been able to be inspired and encouraged to step into that work is by seeing people who have gone before me, who are honestly and openly and vulnerably stepping into that space and really demonstrating it for the community. So I'm not sure, Ben, if there's a way that can be communicated within your community, but I think that for me is the takeaway, that it's to be a strong leader. It seems essential to have that, to demonstrate that degree of vulnerability. What about you, Dave or Erica? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say the same, Ava, and that I think a lot of my distrust in others and life is because there's a discrepancy between what I feel I've been told and what I'm perceiving. So when those align, that's when like the trust feels like it can form. So the vulnerability of knowing what the elders are going through as human beings, I think is what actually forms the trust, which Karen named earlier. And then I feel like we can really get to work together.
Okay, I'm just conscious of time. I was wondering also.
Yeah.
Sorry, please, Dave.
Sorry, Ben, does that answer your question? Does it feel, yeah? Okay, great. You can follow up with any of us afterwards if you want to go a bit deeper. Okay. Any other from James or Stefan?
I have a one sentence thing I wanted to add, just because I think we haven't spoken to it, which is Dunbar's number. I'll just say it. You may be familiar with that, but if you're not, that we have had conversations about that, about what is an actual realistic size that can maintain the quality of these relationships.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks for sending that in the link. So James or Stefan, any questions or any insights or any comments?
I think I'm most intrigued. So it's a very nuanced thing I think I'm seeing or referencing. So it's taking a moment to come into focus. It's something like it feels like your community. I guess what I'm most curious about is where do you think the elements of your culture, particularly as they relate to things like relating to each other, finding your place or sense of belonging within your culture, sort of as opposed to your Dharma, where do you think they come from? How did they arise, or how are they maintained? Do they shift? So I guess what I'm thinking about is when a new person comes to your community, they come with their own culture, and now that culture is coming into contact with your culture, and I guess I'm trying to find a sense of like, is your culture something that is responsive, or does your culture expect new people's culture to be sort of responsive to yours within your community?
That's a great question. We've all got a very strong shared value at Clear Sky, and that's to awaken in this lifetime. That's what we're all on about. And so we're very into diversity. Our Catherine Sensei has traveled all over the world and fluent in many languages. loves to welcome in all sorts of diversity, but the key element or the key thing that the person needs to really and it evolves over time is to be really into awakening in this lifetime, right? And that's the key element. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in and speak to that.
Can jump in a
Definitely.
bit. Yeah, really, really good question, James. I think everyone who's moved here and maybe any community has grappled with this. My experience has definitely been that my experience is that most people don't have a sense of place in a meaningful way. I feel that, and I maybe project that, but I believe that's true for most people, and at least in North America, who didn't grow up on a specific piece of land connected to that environment, and we're all longing to rebuild that. And to build that, for me, in my opinion, necessarily requires stripping away what's there and building back up. And I think that is necessarily painful and difficult and confusing. And there isn't a map for that. Buddhism has a wonderful map for spirituality and awakening and consciousness, but this map is new and global and confusing. I spent 3 months at Clear Sky, left, and then moved back. And my first year, I said, well, just drop everything you care about, and if it's important, it'll come back. And that certainly helped me get through the first year. It's certainly not a clear skies way or the highway in any sense of the word, and there's a very strong vision and commitment, as Karen just mentioned, of this is what we're on about, and also a sense that we've built a certain culture and systems, and we think it works, and we welcome discussion and feedback in a balanced and somewhat structured way. So we don't have someone, I came in to manage the kitchen first, and I'm not going to change every single recipe and every single ingredient right off the bat. Ideally not, even if I might think there's way better ways of doing things. And I think that things show up over time, and there is capacity to bring in different elements. So I'm a very, I'm half, my father's East Indian. He grew up there. I have that whole cultural element. I'm historically fairly extroverted and sociable and kind of out doing lots of explorative activities, and kind of withheld that for a few years before slowly finding ways to weave that in through different career opportunities. Recently started hosting ecstatic dances in the area that I'm trying to weave into my Dharma as one example, but was patient for about 8 years of saying, well, maybe this just isn't part of my life anymore. So I think that there's opportunity to really reflect on what parts of culture are necessary for a healthy person, and to not shun them or make them bad or wrong, but to strip them away, start from a clean slate of purification, and then figure out what do I really want, and how can I offer and weave that into the community that's here. And it requires some struggle. If there's something like, I think we should celebrate solstices and ignore all the regular holidays, whatever the example is, that you requires a bit of fight to insert that into the structure, and that fight makes it strong when it's successful, even though it's different than maybe the mainstream politically correct model of let's welcome all the voices and have consensus and give everyone room. I find that gets, though nice, dysfunctional and hard to have things really land or get legs. So it's a fruitful struggle is how I would summarize it. And I think we're hoping to make it easier for others is the other big silver lining here, is that we're hoping to be that living lab Ava spoke about. It. This is how we struggled through it, and maybe we can help others struggle through it quicker and more easily.
Does that help, James? Very well said, Dave. Yeah, that helps.
Can I just add a very quick thought, Karen, that I think one other last point is when we founded the center, Capel said, like, think 400 years. And the world's changing so much. So I think it's very much just in the culture that how do we build something and evolve something that's going to work for the younger generation. So I think we're always thinking that way. The Ava and Erica and Dave will be the people that will be running the place soon, right? And then new people coming in. So how do we evolve a structure that's going to work for that, and how do we honor the lineage and tradition, the wisdom within that? So it's a real dance. Yeah, I don't think we know where it's going. So there's a responsiveness in the culture, but trying to keep the authentic center.
Great. And, you know, lastly, I think because we do the work, we actually live the teachings, and we're very down to earth. We're very approachable. We've not really much bells and whistles. We don't really wear our, you know, we're not into the whole costume thing, you know, we're just very normal, very ordinary, developing the extraordinary inside and then being of benefit to all we can with our skills, talents, and abilities. Right. So I want to respect some of you. I know, Christopher, you need to leave. It is 5 minutes after the hour, so if you need to go, please go. Do you have any more questions, James and Ben? Some of us can stay on, otherwise we're going to do a closing.
Yeah, I do need to go, but yeah, I mean, plenty to talk about. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
I do have a kind of I don't know, observation, inquiry thing that I'm exploring, and I'd love to be joined in that exploration to some degree by you guys. Of course I'm comparing what I'm seeing and experiencing of how you guys function together as a culture and as a collective, with what me and my collaborator, how we function in the culture that we live in our day-to-day life. And there are similarities and there are differences. One of them seems to be like I want to say something like that you guys really focus on strengthening the individual within a structure, where you hope that that structure, through being comprised of strengthened individuals, will be very persistent and long lasting. And we feel as though we very slightly differently are seeking to strengthening a structure by strengthening the individuals. So we do our best to feel into what the we that is emergent within our relationality is, and actually try to listen to that we as it emerges. And we find that this gives this interesting space in which, as individuals stepping into that we now have more space to unfold in our own uniqueness and to contribute further to that we and to allow that we to emerge even more. You know, and then we come into contact with a bunch of other cultures, and we recognize that it feels like it's a little bit more about finding what emerges in the self and then bringing that forward to the collective, and sort of like holding to it sometimes quite like strongly from a place of kind of power. Yeah, and it feels like a bunch of people holding up their own umbrella in order to shelter and contribute to the group. And what we feel like we're doing is a little bit more like gathering under one big umbrella that we both, or all the people who are in connection with us, support. So I'm just curious what that riff brings up for you guys.
So what I hear you say, James, is you feel like for you, you create a structure where the we can unfold in your group. Is that right? Whereas when you're listening to us, you feel like we come with our individual contributions that create this we under one umbrella. Did I get you?
Yes, and that you have a lot of elements in your culture to specifically support you as individuals coming forward. Like making certain that each of you has the strongest and best personal individual that you can have. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. I need a few minutes to think about that. I think we have a motto here. What's good for the person is good for the organization or good for the community. So that idea of, you know, how trustworthy can I become in order to contribute to the community is big. Like we're on about how does when I walk into a particular room, what is my impact on others, right? What is my impact on others? Is very strong for us. And we also, a very strong ego can awaken, a weak one cannot. That's been the experience. That's what's in the text. So, a lot of us come in and we have a lot of refuges falsely, and we have a lot of false refuges, right? So we end up our elders and our fully awakened teachers become tuning forks for us, right? In order to be able to awaken in this lifetime, and then all the structures and systems around are to support the clearest mind in any moment, right? Which may not be the teacher or the elder, and it could be the newest person that just came into the community, right? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, because I'm not quite sure what it is exactly, but I'm just going on intuition here. So if Ava or Erica want to jump in, please do.
I don't have anything. I think you summed it up well, Karen. I don't have anything else to add, unless if there's any further clarification that you're looking for, James. Happy to
Well,
jump
I
in.
did like some of that language, particularly around when someone has something that's particularly valuable to the group, that there are elements of your culture that seek to sort of maximize their capacity to share that for the benefit of all. Yeah, I liked that. And yeah, you've given me a lot to think about. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And yeah, I may reach out, and certainly if either me or Michael are ever in British Columbia, we'll definitely do whatever we can to seek an opportunity to drop by.
Yeah, great. We have a weekly meditation circles on Thursday evening. Just if you're dropping by, try and make it Thursday evening, because we'll welcome you in, because that's when we're open.
Where are you guys located?
We're in the interior of BC,
Mhm.
between Kimberley, Fernie, Cranbrook, Whitefish.
Oh, cool. Yes, one of my cousins lives in Cranbrook. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you, James. We're gonna
Yeah.
hear. We usually end with a prayer, which we'll share with you, which is may these wholesome and powerful activities eliminate negativity and ignorance while reducing happiness and illumination for the uplifting of the world. And then we give it all away for the benefit of all. And yeah, you can contact any of us individually and have a chat if you want to further delve into this, or just have a chat with any of us. That would be great, because I'd like to hear more about
Awesome.
your community too.
Yeah, for sure. I will when I can find time, I'll definitely reach out.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Okay. Thanks much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, James.
You too.